Now, some of you may have already seen the harrowing footage of our Sky News team caught under fire in Kyiv. My goodness, they narrowly escaped Russian soldiers and managed to come back home safely, back to their families. Here's how events unfolded.
Okay, guys.
Keep going. Stuart. Go on, Stuart, I'm rolling.
The five of us have made it out of the car, down the embankment, and we just can't believe we're alive.
Okay, guys, well done, everyone.
I think I'm hit.
Okay, yeah.
Where?
Stuart, through there, behind that wall.
Go.
Go on in.
Go.
We run into a warehouse unit looking for cover.
Go.
One at a time.
Yeah.
I'm pleased and relieved to say that my colleague of more than 30 years is here. There was a time when I thought that it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Tell us what happened.
There had been a curfew in place in Kyiv for 2 days previously because the local authorities, security, were actually looking for what they described as saboteurs, Russian saboteurs, who they said had infiltrated Kyiv and were there to carry out attacks on civilians. So we'd been in the city, but the war was gaining pace, and we wanted to go to a town called Bucha, which is just outside Kyiv. It's really a suburb, actually. And it took us hours and hours to get there through probably 20-plus checkpoints that were very jumpy. And it was getting late, and we just basically called it a day and said we just can't get there. The battle space was changing. Helicopter gunships, that's Russians, were in the air and firing about a kilometre from where we were, and we basically decided to call it a day. The routes that we had used to try and get to Bucha were now closed. They were actually part of the front line. We stopped at a police checkpoint and we asked what the best direction was back to the centre of the city, and they pointed us down this road. Probably no more than 400 or 500 metres away, there was a bang on the car. I think the front left wheel had blown, and we weren't quite certain what it was, came to a stop, and then the firing started from what was an ambush position, both in front of the car and on the left-hand side of the car. And one of the things that's interesting about this, Kay, is these incidents happen a lot. It's very rare that the camera is rolling for the whole time, and Richie Mokhtar, our cameraman, made that decision to keep rolling because he'd already said to me, I was talking to him yesterday about it, he said it was already eerily quiet, so he and I, in fact all of us were a bit worried about what was happening. So he decided to start rolling, and he kept going. And what we have found later, and what we were pretty certain about at the time, is that civilian cars were being targeted by unknown gunmen, and a number of families were killed in cold blood. We were driving in an unmarked family saloon. We could have just been a family. There's no possible way you could have actually seen accurately who was in that car. And it was fired upon. I think, particularly myself, Dominic Van Heerden, our producer, and Richie, were convinced it was a mistake, that it was a Ukrainian militia checkpoint. And we started shouting, journalists.
Yeah.
And if anything, the firing intensified after that. And really, the hardest bit was to try and get out of the car, which, you know, it's a standard procedure. I mean, you do have to, it's called debussing. And we knew we had to debus. Two of the team had already got out, and the three of us were left, and it was a matter of choosing your moment when to get out. And, you know, you talk about choosing a moment, but, I mean, this is all going so fast and there's so much firing. It really is luck as if you get out. And it is miraculous is that in an ambush scenario like this, 5 people got out of that car. Richie
was hiding behind the engine block, wasn't he?
Richie had got himself. I mean, he's a big guy, but he got himself into the well of the passenger seat, and basically the engine block was saving him. I was watching. You could only see the camera angle. All you can actually see are the bullets from where his camera is pointing down, because he can't lift his head. But I'm actually onto the back seat in this sort of position, which is where I was eventually shot, and I'm watching the windscreen and then the driving wheel and then the panel of the car just completely disintegrate and fall off. And I was like, this is unbelievable. And at that point, I remember saying, right, I know I'm going to die now. I know I am going to die.
You thought you were going to die?
Oh, 100%. And I remember thinking, I wonder how much it's going to hurt. Because the intensity was such, and it was sort of, I just didn't think I'd be getting out. Then I got hit. And actually, I've been asked to describe what it's like. And the best description it was put to me, is it like this? And it is absolutely true. Like being hit with a hammer with sparklers on it, fireworks sparklers. So it's and we think that's the flesh burn. It's sizzling, and that's your flesh, and then you're hit with a hammer at the same time. But it wasn't that bad, and incredibly, I remember putting my helmet on. My helmet had been in my lap. Put my helmet on and realised I could see there was debris from everywhere, and there were lots of our cameras and phones. So I leant back and picked up my phone and thought, I've got to have the phone. Got out of the car, and in the footage...
When you say get out of the car, I mean, how did you get out of the car when you were being shot at?
Yeah, and shot. Weirdly, on the rushes, and I think it's actually on one of the pieces, you can hear Richie shout, "What are you doing?" And apparently, I have no recollection of this, I got out of the car and stood up and sort of walked to the embankment, saw the guys at the bottom of it, was about 40 feet down, I suppose, took a couple of steps and then dived. I'm pretty certain I knocked myself out, but I can't guarantee it. The next minute I remember is seeing Richie near me. But now, I'd left before him. I don't think it was long before him, but... and I know that the guys had been shouting up to him and he didn't reply. And at that stage, everyone assumed he was hit and possibly had died. But he didn't want to reply because he felt that the firing had gone on for so long, they would assume he'd been hit or was dead. And he waited for it to go quiet. And then as soon as he thought, right, they think I'm a goner, he then got out and ran. And it was only a couple of days later when we were reviewing the pictures that as he's running, there is just a hail of bullets. They realised that he was coming. So he's extremely lucky. Bear in mind, Richard had already been hit twice in the back. It's just his armour was on and saved him. Because it was quite high up. It would have gone straight into his lungs.
Yeah.
So he was lucky.
And then this happened.
We've got ourselves into a garage. Somehow we found our way in. There's 3 guys working here, and they've said we can stay, but there's a lot of firing going on outside. We don't know why. It appears to be mortars and shooting. It's scary stuff, as you can imagine. It's a big fight. We might even be on the front line, and we're hoping the military come to get us, but who knows?
And we talked in the days afterwards, didn't we? And you said you didn't think that you were out of danger. You thought that they were going to come and get you in that warehouse.
Absolutely. I think it's often in various scrapes that I've been in, after the initial terrible one, it doesn't actually suddenly start getting any better because we're very grateful to these 3 men who let us into their warehouse. But we were really degrading quite quickly there. Obviously, I was bleeding, not terribly, but I was bleeding enough, and we had no water. And you can see I look absolutely terrible. I've got a terrible shock there, probably concussion. And then this fighting started. Now, we, to this day, have no idea what was going on, but that was in and out. So we sort of think that the Russian team were coming towards us. To our position, perhaps to finish us, and that another Ukrainian unit, having heard all the firing at our car in the first place, had come down the road, perhaps just to see what was happening, and engaged with them. Because that went on a long time.
Hours.
And the whole of us being in there lasted hours, and the shooting was a long time as well. That was a proper engagement. And to be fair to for all of us, that was terrifying. We were having communications with Sky, of course, and with our super fixer, who wasn't with us at that stage, Azad, and he was ringing everyone he knew. So we were beginning to get communications. Always, thank goodness, I had my phone, or went and got it, and we were then talking to the authorities, talking to the police, and they said basically, we will come, but we won't get you until the morning. And so we sort of prepared ourselves to bed down. We went into a small room within this warehouse and were prepared to sort of stay there for the night
It was one of those ones that we were very concerned that, you know, we'd even wake up in the morning and not be surrounded. But we understood it was dark outside by this stage. It was dangerous driving around and would be dangerous for the police.
And one of the reasons that you wanted to tell the story was because of the suffering that the people of Ukraine are going through. And I particularly remember the 21-year-old soldier that was on the bridge on his own. Tell me about that.
Yeah, he was an amazing guy. We were filming a variety of elements, but we went up to actually get a nice picture from some of the bridges that are important in Kyiv. The significance being is if the Russians can get across the bridges, they're right into the centre of town. And so the east and the west of the city are effectively controlled by those bridges. That's why we had gone there. This boy was guarding the bridge on his own. He was quite friendly. He said, "You can stay with me, you can film, but, you know, you have to leave." He spoke very good English. And we were just chatting to him, and he's explained, I think he'd find his bullets, about, I think, 20 bullets he'd ever shot in his life.
Should we listen to what he had to say?
A Russian base in my village. And from my village, they're gonna go here on Kyiv to capture it. Yeah, it's really scary and terrifying. I am called to my parents. They really scared. There's Russians in our village, enemies. There's tanks, heavy vehicle. I hope that they will be fine.
21 years old, younger than both our sons.
Yeah.
Very brave.
Very brave, and interesting. His story was absolutely viral. It was just a quick interview, and I think, you know, one of the social media, something like 31 million views of his comments, and he sums up people. He's not a soldier. Clearly, he's not a soldier, but he's just doing the right thing. And he talked about his parents being surrounded by Russians. And the reason we were doing the story, and the reason why we wanted to put the story of us being attacked, is that this is what is happening to ordinary people, and there have been other incidents, and they're happening right now. We heard of one yesterday, almost identical, family in a car, all dead. And of course, we've got there are many other elements of the war that are going on, which isn't just people being shot in small numbers, but in large numbers, and obviously the horrendous life for them in places like Mariupol, where they're being bombed out of existence. Horrendous.
And you and Alex Crawford and your teams always put yourselves in danger so that our Sky News viewers right around the world can find out what is happening. And particularly a story that stands out for me was when you were on the roof in Afghanistan, in Kabul. I'm sure you remember exactly what I'm talking about. Let's remind our viewers what happened.
I hear a lot of shouting coming down the road behind me. In fact, it is I think it's a procession of the Taliban. Yes, it is. There's the white flag, and they're coming down the street just next to us. They're in their shalwar kameez. They're led by a white flag, and they're chanting as they go down.
Cool as a cucumber.
I didn't feel it at the time.
I bet you didn't. What were you thinking?
Well, we knew they were coming. It had been getting closer and closer for days. You know, we'd had all this intelligence briefings, all from the foreign governments, the United States, Britain, that, you know, Kabul would hold for weeks, etc. It was like quite clear to us by about the Thursday that it was going to go. And then I think it was on the Saturday morning. I think that was a Saturday. It was like, we know that we're completely surrounded, and it was a real case of what's it going to be like? You know, what will happen when they come in? And actually, it was very different to what we expected. And they actually were quite. The Taliban were very controlled in the first early days, but. You know, I was glad I was actually on air, to be honest, because waiting to be on or just sitting in the hotel was actually terrifying. It was better to be up and running and working. And
you didn't leave. You stayed and
yeah.
You carried on with our coverage. And to that end, Sky has been nominated for a BAFTA today. I'm sure you're aware of that. Afghanistan,
I had heard, yeah.
The end game, and we've got an image of when you were on the ground talking to local people.
You know, there's another group This is women and children. You see this all the time. Women and children just in huge, huge numbers. Yes, they're getting the system done. Yes, it's getting better. But, you know, it feels more like a desperate evacuation now than at any given point. You can just feel the desperation. It's quite remarkable. And I think everyone here knows, you know, we're only days now, days until the flight stops.
Lots of people asked me, I'm sure you were bombarded, as were the others covering events like this. Your bravery, are you aware that you're being brave at the time?
No, not at all. No, not at all. In fact, I'm really not a very brave person at all.
Oh, come on.
No, I'm seriously not. We do this, and I've been asked a lot, why do you do it? Because actually, I believe, and I don't want to get all too highfalutin about this, but somebody has to bear witness to what's going on. It's a well-said statement, but it's absolutely true. And lots of my friends have died doing exactly that. And it's upsetting when that happens, and a friend was buried yesterday, in fact, Pierre, who was well known to people at Sky, worked for Fox. So, you know, we have to do, or we want to do this job, and the people who do it all feel exactly the same. You have to bear witness. Now, you get yourself into positions so you can do that job. Inevitably, though, they are often quite dangerous, and you try to mitigate for that, and try to make sure that the risk is as small as possible. But there is inevitably going to be some risk. And it was interesting with the Afghanistan, was I was asked, did you ever think of leaving prior to them arriving? And I mean, the only answer I thought, well, I was there to see them arrive, so no, there's no point. What was the point of me leaving? I shouldn't have gone. And that's one of those instances. We were leaving, for example, in Ukraine, the battlefield to go back to a hotel because it was too dangerous. So if you see, we hadn't gone looking for trouble. It came to us, and I think that's what happens in a lot of these times. So it's not bravery; it just comes to you.
And I think I'm right in saying that you've been with Sky 30 years today.
Well, apparently it's 30 years today, which is obviously a life sentence or even longer, I think.
I was going to say happy anniversary, but maybe that's not quite the right phraseology to use. But are there any particular incidents that stand out for you?
Well, there is a number. A lot of them, some really nice, obviously, some great interviews and people that I've met and stories where we've helped people. But a few nightmare ones. Obviously, this was one.
Yeah, I'm thinking about Mosul in particular.
Mosul, one was terrible with cameraman Nathan Hale. Again, we weren't looking for trouble and got ourselves into a lot of trouble.
This is what happened.
What?
You okay? You okay? Yeah. You ready? Yeah, I'm okay. You okay? Hey, Habibi. Right. You should go.
You ready on that? Okay, give me a quick one now. Yeah. Well, enormous explosion has just come down. I think it was a mortar just landed in between us. You can see the whole place is covered in smoke.
This is the bomb from Islamic State's own drone pictures released on social media. It is chaotic, everyone is dazed, but we are being attacked still. The whizzing is incoming. Through the smoke, the walking wounded come, looking for help.
At the time, I didn't think it could have got any closer than that.
No, you would have. I must admit, I think I'd have said that was the worst it was ever going to be, and this one was easily far worse. Classic example of this, of where that initial explosion and huge explosion that it was, and it killed, I mean, dozens and dozens of people. We were very, very lucky. But, I mean, what happened afterwards was actually, it was even worse. I mean, we were running around, rubble being shot at for what felt like hours. It was certainly a long time, and eventually we were able to escape. But, you know, that you'd have thought that the blast would have been the end of it, but it really, really wasn't. And, yeah, we had to eventually get out, and there's missiles flying over us all the time, etc. as well. I think actually this was us actually going on the way in, would you believe? This is us when we were trying to get through the rubble. A lot of fighting going on. Islamic State were all round, and then the helicopters are put up by the Iraqi forces to protect them. But the problem with that is they have to shoot everything. So basically, their own soldiers take cover as best they can, but anyone moving around gets shot. So really dangerous.
And the threat of death comes from lots of different avenues. And I'm thinking about what happened when you went to Italy. I mean, multi-award-winning coverage for that. Let's just remind our viewers what happened there.
They're fighting a war here and they are losing. The sheer numbers of people succumbing to the coronavirus is overwhelming every hospital in northern Italy. The staff are working flat out, trying to keep these people from deteriorating further. They're trying to stop them from dying. This isn't an intensive care unit, it's an emergency ward. The ICU is full. People have only just arrived here and they're in terrible shape. This is an absolute constant. This killer pandemic is virtually out of control. The patients are literally gasping for air.
And the spectre of COVID was paralysing the country, the world at that time. And yet you once again went towards danger. What's in your brain? What makes you do that?
No one had seen an ICU, or in that case, what looked like an ICU, but was actually, as I said, the emergency ward. We'd not seen it. And there were a lot of sceptics. And it took an awful lot of work to get us in. I know an awful lot of people wouldn't have done it. And I talked to our bosses in the hours as we were leading up. And I was talking to the head of news the other day about it, John Riley, who was saying he came very near to saying, I'm not letting you go in. But we pretty much convinced them that we thought it was the right thing. We had been trained. You know, we did have the right gear on. We didn't know much about the virus at all, let's be honest. At that stage, nobody knew anything. And I think in terms of important stories, the first proper pandemic in 100 years, the first that's ever been a television pandemic, I was very proud for us to have gone and done that the first time anyone had seen it. Now, everyone's done it since, and the story's changed, and hard to believe, really, in 2 years. And here we are. I mean, Sky News has a lot of controls because of our work practices, but outside you would never know there had been a virus. Of course, there really is one still, and it's very, very dangerous still.
But it's Russia that invading Ukraine, which has brought you with us today. And we are hearing that the Russians are moving away from Kyiv and the like. And the big question is, should the world believe Russia when it says that's what it's going to do? I did actually put that to the Deputy Prime Minister earlier on, and this is what he had to say.
We judge the Russian military machine by its actions, not just its words. There's obviously some scepticism that it will regroup to attack again, rather than seriously engage in diplomacy or anything of that nature. Of course, the door to diplomacy will always be left ajar, but I don't think you can trust what is coming out of the mouth of Putin's war machine.
And to that end, we have taken the opportunity to bring in the Ukrainian ambassador to the UK. Mr. Ambassador, thank you for taking the time to join us again. I know you did want to just say a couple of words to Stuart, didn't you?
We had a chance just to chat a couple of minutes before the interview started. And I told him that I'm very proud to actually be able to meet with him and to tell you that you have very brave and a bit crazy, in a good sense, people to do the job. And thank you for coming, for doing this. And I understand how important to all those people, including this young soldier, to know that their story is heard.
Well, we really appreciate it. And, you know, it's been an amazing event for us to be in Ukraine and to meet the people and amazing stories of people that has gone on for years. I mean, I was there in 2014, so it's not a new story, but the incredible resilience of the people, particularly, well, throughout the country, has been remarkable to report on, actually.
The part you told me about, that's the usual car you were driving, and the people could be in there, just families, and be targeted. That's something we wanted people here to understand, that actually this is dangerous just for the civilians. And I asked you about the protective gears you had, and they stopped a couple of bullets in your people. So that's why we are going here and drastically asking and begging for the protective gears for military, for medical staff, for firefighters, for first responders, for journalists like you, just to save lives. And they're actually saving lives.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. I'm sure Britain will be sending.
Yeah, and as Stuart was saying, you know, we've seen colleagues die in almost exact same circumstances. Pierre, you were talking about from Fox.
That's right, and you know, I mean, the point is, journalists talking about themselves is always rather embarrassing, but a large number have died at a rate unusual in most wars, which we cover a lot of. Obviously, it pales into insignificance with the civilian population. But yeah, these incidents that we've talked about, which effectively ours, with people actually being targeted, I mean, it is a disgrace, because clearly these people, particularly families, are not a threat to anyone. And pretty much anyone with a weapon would know they're not a threat. And that is a big problem, and it's not getting any easier.
Mr. Ambassador, do you believe Russia when it says that it is moving away from Kyiv and the peace talks do seem to be working?
Frankly, we don't believe Russians at all, not me personally. And I think that they're just maneuvering, trying to regain their strength, because, as we've seen, they're been beaten quite heavily by Ukrainian forces, especially around Kyiv and big cities. So I guess they will regroup and will come again and again and again. That's what they're doing. It's not just this war. They've been doing it for centuries.
What's your view on the suggestions that the Ukrainian delegation were poisoned when they were taking part in the peace talks?
I don't wish anybody bad, I mean, if they feel it this way. But frankly speaking, I guess if Russians wanted them to be poisoned to death, they would be dead by now. And remember how people who drank polonium here, how the Skripal's family was poisoned, and how so many people suffered around this. So I believe that it will come. Sooner or later, Russians will do something like that. And people asking me, for example, if I'm secure here, do I have protection and everything? I believe that we can feel protected anywhere around the globe. And Russians are going in such a scaled operation against Ukraine and actually against the whole world.
And I thought for the people of Ukraine as they continue to suffer 5 weeks on.
We just had this month, which was on the last Thursday, how people are surviving all these months of the bombardment and shelling and everything. We had this war for 8 years, but it was somewhere in east of Ukraine, somewhere far from cities like Kyiv, and people were having more or less normal life. Now the whole hell broke out, and everybody's 3 million already crossed the borders. People are leaving, deserting the nation, and we're still fighting. Some of the journalists like you are now fighting. Some of them became operators of the anti-tank rockets. The people from all professions, from all walks of life, have to protect their nation. And you believe, when we start talking to you, not many people believed when I was saying that it won't be a walk in the park. People were, yeah. But that's actually what was happening. We're still fighting. We hope that, it's very difficult to believe, but we can actually defeat Russians. We can actually win this war.
Okay. Let's see what happens in the coming weeks. Mr. Ambassador, thank you for taking the time to join us on the programme this morning. Thank you.
Please don't do it again.
And 30th anniversary, as I said. I don't know what's going to happen next. I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask you on the telly, but yeah, let's see. But thank you for recounting what happened. And I know that you really wanted to make the point that it's not about you, it's not about the crew, it's about telling the story of the people of Ukraine and the struggles that they are facing day after day after day.
And in every story we do, they're always about people, not us.
OK. Thank you both.